All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this evening's Planning Control Committee meeting. Before the meeting gets started, I'd like to invite our committee clerk, Chanel Wickenden, to explain how proceedings tonight are going to work.
Thank you. The rules of the debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone units. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the results will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Back to you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Right. So item number 1, I have apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Louise Peace, and having given due notice, Councillor John Claydon will be the substitute for her this evening. Are there any further apologies? No, I'm not seeing any. At the moment, Councillor Muir isn't with us. However, if he attends late, obviously he'll be bound by the relevant parts of the Constitution. So item number 2, minutes of the meetings held on the 18th of July and 25th of July 2024. I propose that we take both of these sets of minutes as read and approve the minutes of those meetings as a true record of the proceedings. Could I have a seconder, please? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Happy to second.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? No, I'm seeing no one indicate. Great. So could we have a vote, please, Chanel?
Chair, that motion's carried.
Great. Thank you very much. And item number 3 is notification of other business. I have received no notifications of other business. Item number 4 is chair's announcements. Recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being recorded and the recording will be available both on the council's YouTube channel as well as on our ModGov site alongside the documents from this evening's meeting. Number 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item, and a detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the chair's announcements on the agenda. Item number 3 is to clarify matters for registered speakers. Members of the public in groups of supporters or objectors have up to 3 minutes per person. Where there is only one public supporter or objector, then the member of the public will have up to 5 minutes. I think on each item, we've only got a single individual representing this evening, so you will all have 5 minutes to make the points that you wish to make to the committee. All speakers will be given a warning around the 1 minute mark when you've got 1 minute remaining. I will try and be as unintrusive as possible. I don't want to distract you or cut you off mid-flow. So if you are speaking quickly, I'll wait and hold for you to take a breath and give you an appropriate warning at that point in time as well. Following the conclusion of your speaking time, members of the committee will be invited to ask you for any points of clarification. So if you don't manage to get something out in the speech, hopefully members of the committee will be able to ask appropriate questions and draw that out. At the end of your allotted speaking time, I will advise you that time has ended and I'll ask you politely to stop speaking. Again, if you're mid-sentence and I can tell you're wrapping up, I shan't cut you off unfairly. Section 4.823A of the Constitution. For the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration for that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. As always, colleagues, if anybody needs a break at any point in time, please let me know and I will hold proceedings so that we can ensure that everybody is supported and we're able to get through the agenda together appropriately. Number 5, community governance review. You will have noticed when you walked in, some very nice posters have been set out on your desks. This is because the council has resolved to commence a community governance review for the whole district, which focuses on parish level arrangements. The first stage of this review is to consult, and the council is inviting our residents, parish councils, and any interested parties to have their say on current arrangements, as well as suggestions for future arrangements via a survey that's open and running until the 7th of October. There's a dedicated webpage on our website titled Community Governance Review, which includes a link to the survey as well. And as I said, you had these lovely posters on your desk when you walked in, and they have been produced so that if you've got access to notice boards, community centres, windows, anywhere that's relevant, and you can do a bit of extra outreach on the survey, you can get these put up. The QR code is also on the poster, so people can scan that with the phone. We will also, I think, have stacks of these, or at least the QR code, at the various community surgeries, and potentially at the forums as well, if they occur during the time that the survey is running. Right. Number 6 is the withdrawal of items. You should all have received an email. Apologies that it came through relatively close to the date of the committee, and I'm sorry if anybody did start reading the papers before this. However, items 8, 9 and 10 of the agenda relating to the Bull High Street, Gosmore Hitchin, SG4 7QG, have all been withdrawn from the agenda due to the withdrawal of the call-in request, and these applications are now going to be considered under officers' delegated decision-making powers. Right, back to the main agenda items. Item number 5, public participation. This evening, I have got 3 people listed as members of the public to participate. I have Councillor Nigel Mason, who is sitting to my left. I have Mr. James Gran. Yep. And Jeremy Burrows. Lovely. Good evening. Right. That's all of the preamble done. So I will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Westbourne Residential Care Home at 9 Bedford Road, Hitchin, Hertfordshire, SG5 2TP. You will notice, colleagues, that Councillor Mason is vacating the top table. This is because he's declared a predetermination on this item, because he's made the call in on this application and will be moving to the public speaking gallery in order to present as a member advocate. Once he has spoken and once we have asked our points of clarification, Councillor Mason will then leave the chamber for the duration of this item and the vote. As Councillor Muir is not with us yet and we are about to kick off, if Councillor Muir does attend during the course of this item, he will not be able to vote on it. Right, I think that's everything. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening.
Sorry, apologies. Sorry, Councillor Mason.
Sorry, I have a query, Chair.
Yes.
The last time I was member advocate, I was advised that after I spoke, I would need to leave the thing, which I accept. Can I just note, and perhaps I'm not particularly going to dig my heels on for this tonight, but for future meetings, I noticed that the advocate for the applicant is in the room and can listen to what I say. Then I have to leave. It doesn't seem particularly equivalent. I just wondered if it's something we need to think about.
I think that is a valid point. And of course, you might leave the room, but I'm sure that you can still observe, given that the meeting is broadcast on YouTube. It might be as you've said, you're not going to dig your heels in. I shan't ask for advice, but I think that the point has been well made, and it's something that perhaps could be considered outside of this meeting. Yeah, and the screen's on in your room too as well, so you don't have to battle with the Wi-Fi and your mobile, which is nice.
Thank you.
Right, I still have no Councillor Muir, so I think we'll start. Ben.
Thank you. So I just have one update to the reports, and that is just to confirm that the applicant has agreed to the pre-commencement conditions set out within the recommendation. So I can go on to the presentation. Thank you. So this is an application for the change of use of a residential care home into 16 residential apartments. The proposal includes a roof extension to increase the roof height of the building, the insertion of dormers and roof lights, and development will also include internal and external alterations. So the application is here with a resolution to grant, subject to agreement of conditions and informatives, and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement. Thank you. Goes on to the first picture, please. Okay, so this is the front of the site of the existing building taken from Bedford Road. Next photo, please. Thank you. Again, so second photo of the application site to the left with a bit more context of Bedford Road. Again, front elevation of the site, just from a different angle, looking onto what is an extended part of what was the original building. So now down Alton Head Way. This is the side view of the building. We can see in front of us is part of a modern extension addition, and then further to the right side, the rear of the picture is the kind of original building itself. So further up Alton Head Way now, looking at kind of the rear of the site with a neighbouring property on the left there. In the background, you can see Bedford Road. Now we're looking at the existing access for the sites. Again, existing access and its relationship with the junction onto Bedford Road. So further down Bedford Road now, looking at the site is still there in the background. Again, with just a bit more context of the site itself. And this is Butts Close, it's a green space with the Hitchin Leisure Centre, not quite visible for me, but it is there in the background. Again, a bit more context of what's in the area. So there we have a flatter development, and then further in the background we have the supermarket. So this is our first plan. This is the location plan with the site as existing. We now have the proposed site plan. This sets out the kind of top-down view with parking and cycle parking also shown. This is the existing front and rear elevation. Existing side elevations. See existing ground and first floor plan. Existing roof plan. The proposed ground and first floor plans. Maybe we could stay on it for a second to give you a chance to have a look. Next plan, please. This is the loft plan or second floor plan with the roof plan proposed. And we have the proposed front and rear elevations. Proposed side elevations. So this plan sets out the turn cycle within the site, but also the parking, and that will be available within the site itself. Again, so these plans are proposed plans that show visibility displays to and from, and the kind of access layout, as well as parking provision, cycle parking provision. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ben. Do you colleagues have any questions for Ben on the presentation? Yes, Councillor Brown.
There's a proposed extension to the ridge height. Is there any way you can show us on the plans there what the difference is? Couldn't see it very easily.
Yeah, if it's like the plans.
Have we got a plan where you've got the original with the new one drawn on?
So if you cycle back through to the plans, we can show you the existing elevations, and we'll fast forward to the proposed elevations, and we can see if we can see the difference. Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. So the
Is that the green line? No.
yeah
On the proposed, just focus on the proposed. It shows the existing and the proposed, and shows it quite well on there.
It's 1.5 meters on the main building.
So just to clarify, the height increase to the main building, it would be 1.5 meter increase, and to the existing the 2-story side later addition, that'd be a 600 mil increase.
Can I have a supplementary to that? So that other building you showed us, flatted development, is that taller than this?
Yeah, I think that's
So in the
four
same area?
floors, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Any other questions for Ben? Yes, Councillor. I'm going to go Councillor Mantle.
It's just a small point. And in the section 106, it talks about one item of £15. Is that actually correct?
Yep, that's correct. I have checked. That's correct.
No comment. Cash.
Thank you. And Councillor Tyson.
That was the same question that I was going to ask. Just to follow that up, this is in lieu of affordable housing. Yeah, all of this section 106 contribution.
Yes. So, but there is a section of an off-site contribution for affordable housing as part of the section 106, and that's included in that table. So it'd be a commuted sum.
But there is
in lieu of.
no affordable housing provided for under this scheme.
No.
All right, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions. So I shall move on to Councillor Mason as the member advocate objecting to this. You've got 5 minutes, Nigel.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And I'm really happy to be representing the views of local residents on this matter. The grounds for this application being called in are primarily serious concerns about the impact on road safety, traffic management and parking. Westbourne Care Home is situated on top of one of the busiest and most notorious traffic junctions in Hitchin, in an area that is already a local watchword for parking issues. For those members who don't know the area, it's the junction of Old Park Street, Alton Headway and Bedford Street, near to Waitrose, Samuel Lucas School and the Butts. This application provides for 12 parking spaces for 16 apartments, which is insufficient and is below the guidelines outlined in the officer's report. According to the guidelines, the 16 flats should be provided with 18 parking spaces for residents plus 12 more for visitors. Instead, there are only 12 in totality, not even one per flat, let alone one per resident. Paragraph 4.3.33 is, with respect, an impressive exercise in wishful thinking to justify the insufficient parking allocation in this application. To quote para 4.3.34, access to a car is not necessary to meet the day-to-day needs of future residents. Necessary? Perhaps not, but that's hardly the point. What counts is what future residents choose to do, not need to do. They probably don't need an espresso machine, a widescreen TV and a Netflix account, but they may well choose to have them. And real life experience tells us that most of those future residents, at least one per flat, if not more, will choose to own a car, as will their visitors. And they will all have to park somewhere in an area that already has an appalling issue with parking. Alton Headway and Bedford Street and surrounding roads are already a notoriously bad area for parking and for traffic congestion, and this application can only make it worse. Then this has already been exacerbated by the recent introduction of residents parking along Bedford Road north of the Westbourne House site. If the residents of the 16 flats and their visitors cannot park in the 12 spaces provided, they will inevitably spill out into the surrounding streets, adding to the existing chronic parking and highways issues. And it's not just parking in itself that's the issue here. This application is an area on top of the junction of Bedford Road, Old Park Road, Alton Headway, Gaping Lane and Bedford Street that are frequently congested during busy times. And I'm interested to know what time of day those photos were taken. They certainly weren't taken in the morning and they certainly weren't taken in the late afternoon. Particularly during drop-off and pick-up times at the adjacent Samuel Lucas Junior School, now enlarged to 2-form entry. This application would result in significantly more traffic onto an already incredibly busy traffic junction with the potential to cause congestion over a wide area of Hitchin. All the cars in and out of the proposed new flats will be directly out into the Bedford Road, Old Park Street, Alton Headway Junction and traffic lights. This is a recipe for chaos and gridlock. And that is without even starting on the chaos that construction traffic will cause in cramped and congested junctions outside a primary school. Also, whether a material consideration or not, there has to be serious concerns about the loss of a large number of residential care home beds in an establishment that is, to our knowledge, presumably financially viable. With an ageing population and more pressure than ever to move recovered patients out of acute care and into the community, we fail to see how closing down Westbourne is in the best interests of the wider community. There are further considerations about the raising of the roof ridge line and the visual impact and the character and appearance of the conservation area, as has been raised by objectors. But above all else, this application provides too few parking spaces for the number of apartments proposed, and it's likely to make worse an already highly challenged local traffic system on an already hugely congested road junction next to a primary school. I'll leave you with Para 111 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. There is an unacceptable impact on as his application stands, and it should therefore be rejected. Too many flats, not enough parking spaces, and no affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Councillor Mason? No, nobody's indicating. I think you made your case very well. I will now ask you to leave the room. However, you may continue watching the committee on the screen next door. Thank you. Right. So next up, I have Mr. James Gran, who is the applicant's agent. Same process. You've got 5 minutes, James.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Your officers have provided a clear report with a recommendation for approval. The scheme is for roof extension and conversion of the existing care home to 16 apartments. The application follows positive responses to a detailed pre-application process with both the Council and the Highway Authority. In regard to the reason for calling, this mainly concerns, as you've heard, the under-provision of parking spaces. 9 out of the 16 units are actually one-person, one-bedroom flats. Hitchin has all amenities for everyday needs and services, including good bus links and, of course, the train station, in order to access wider areas for employment and leisure. Many of the occupiers of the units would therefore not need to own a car, especially these starter units of one-person-sized dwellings, being 9 out of 16. The provision of one space per unit equates to 3/4 of the development having a parking space, being the 12 out of the 16. Just 4 of the smallest units would not have a space. This will be ensured as allocation of spaces to the specific units accordingly. The need to travel by private car would be further reduced from the high degree of home working, which is now so prevalent in so many job roles. Furthermore, an overprovision of 19 cycle spaces is provided to enable local trips to be made by cycling and for visitor cycle spaces too. Visitors can also, of course, access the site from the other sustainable transport modes by bus and train, as well as cycling. The distance to the town centre is a 6-minute walk to the middle of Brand Street, with a 3-minute walk to Waitrose, and the same to the swim centre with gym. The distance to the train station is an 8-minute cycle journey. The nearest bus stops are 1-minute walk away to Bedford Road or a 2-minute walk to Old Park Road. Being within such a sustainable location, the car and cycle parking provision is considered to be a good balance between being highly comparable to the trip generation of the existing care home use, whilst making efficient use of this substantial size building being so proximate to Hitchin Town Centre. The current care home staffing consists of 17 full-time and 12 part-time, as a total of 25 full-time equivalent staff, plus visitors to the site. Many travel locally, so they do not need to park on site, with the rest being able to park as and when shift patterns are come and go throughout the day and night. Therefore, given the highly sustainable location and when taking account of the current use and related trips, the development is highly unlikely to result in the concern regarding more traffic onto a busy junction or causing congestion over a wide area. The local plan policy T2 allows for variation of the standards in such highly sustainable locations, and given the small scale form of dwellings in this case compared to larger family housing. Then the NPPF states at paragraph 115, as Councillor Mason quoted as well, development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. The under-provision of just 4 of the smallest sized units not having a parking space, but taking account of the existing use, the location, the small-scale nature of the development, and the existing on-street parking restrictions in the locality, means there would be in no way be a severe impact on the road network. The Highway Authority have no objection, and the scheme improves the current access onto Orton Head Way by lowering the boundary walls either side for visibility and by widening the entrance in line with Manual for Streets standards. The scheme will provide 16 dwellings for the district's housing supply as general market housing within this highly accessible edge of town centre location. This will only benefit the vitality of the town centre with its social and economic benefits. The scheme also commits to substantial planning obligations, including a commuted sum towards off-site affordable housing of over £1 million, just to clarify from earlier discussion, along with all the other categories in full. These are fully in line with the supplementary planning document for planning obligations. That's including the £15 item as well. The application is therefore considered acceptable for the grant of planning permission as recommended by your officers. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Brown is straight in with a question.
Thank you for that. I'd like to know why you've decided that the affordable housing has to be provided off-site. It seems to me a sustainable location like this is ideal for providing affordable units. So please could you comment?
Yes, certainly. That's addressed in the officer's report. The housing officer comments are were of the view, as in many cases where there's only a single block entity with no new build being constructed on site as part of a proposal, there's then issues with residential social landlords actually wanting or able to take on any affordable units because they have to be provided as a mix within the market housing itself or within one block. And it leads to, as I understand, management issues and apportions of management fees, etc., and the general management of them with those when they're mixed in with general market apartments. So that is covered in the officer report, but as I understand, they're the issues with being able to have any on-site, hence the off-site commuted sum was acceptable way of providing this, yes.
Okay, lovely. Councillor Claydon.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask how the applicant foresees divvying up the parking spaces, given that there are 14 one-bed apartments and 2 two-bed apartments and 12 spaces? How will that maths work? Because it seems like it's going to be a bit inequitable. Some people are going to lose out.
Yes, as I was saying in my discussion, in my comments, it would be allocated so that it's not just a free-for-all each and every case. It would be very clear that the 4 smallest of the of which are 9 in total, but 4 of them would just not have a parking space allocated to that actual property for either sale or rent. And it would be very clear in the sales or rental documents that is apportioned to 1 to each flat. So it will be trickled down from the 2 beds to the larger 1 beds to then the 5 of the 1 person 1 beds, but then the smallest and fairest way is for the smallest ones to have less need for a vehicle, less chances of needing to own a vehicle due to just one person occupancy. They would not, it would be absolutely the case that they would not have a parking space.
Can I follow up? Does it necessarily follow that people who want or need a smaller amount of living space are less likely to need or want a car? It seems quite possible that people may want to buy a smaller flat because of it being less expensive, but still want the flexibility of having transport.
Absolutely, it would, but I think there's lesser chance with the larger flats. These aren't family-sized dwellings anyway, but in a 2-bedroom flat, you could have a young family certainly, and there's more chance, I feel, of car ownership, car demand being higher, the increased size of any property. So young professionals or downsizers that perhaps don't need or want a car and can perfectly. So Hitchins being so close to the town centre for all their needs, I think it would be the fairest way for the 4 smallest units to not have a parking space available at all, and the 12 remaining to have one, for one space to be on site for the remaining 12 out of the 16 units.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling to get my head around the 1-person, 1-bed flats. Is there going to be a rule that there's only one person allowed in the 1-bed flat? You're not allowed to have a visitor. You're not allowed to have anyone over. You're not going to have a car. I just find it hard to, you're trying to justify that, a smaller flat means just one person. They probably don't need a car as to justify, and there just not being enough spaces for the number of dwellings there are going to be. And how exactly would you suggest that you would advertise these only allowed to have one person in them flats? Because I'll be honest with you, you're really not selling it to me as being a nice place to live. How do you justify that level of? I think the word's dwelling occupancy is what I'm trying to get to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sort of the points come out is that what's the evidence base, because we're hearing a lot of assumption at the moment about what's likely to happen, but I think some of us know very, very well that with all the best will, a developer can say a property is only suitable for one person. Our financial circumstances in younger generations means that we will probably end up having families in those small spaces because you've got to start somewhere. So how are we squaring the circle?
In answer, the technical space standards for dwellings are set out nationally, and these all the units meet the space standards for their applicable bedroom size, whether it be a single or a double-sized bedroom, and the applicable number of occupants as set out in the technical space standards. So 9 out of the 16 are 1-person or 1-bedroom and 1-person sized overall flats. Yes, there is obviously no enforcement, etc., that takes place over couples or starting a young family within one. All that can be done, though, from a planning point of view, is to ensure that dwellings are of a sufficient minimum size, and the mix of them in a development, etc., and not control future intensive occupancy. But it's highly likely that the smallest units will either be, or they're designed to be, 1-person, 1-person units. But if they were to be 2 persons, they can equally be young professionals or downsizers that, again, just don't need a vehicle at all to access everyday needs and services. It would be absolutely unavailable for a parking space to be on site. So they would choose to either have to park in somewhere else, but that would be far further afield from the site. It would be very few in number as any potential, or they would not have a car or car rental schemes available, etc. And obviously that's after all the public transport accessibility and cycling. So that can't be policed in the future at all, apart from housing and welfare standards. But the technical standards are there to set out in terms of planning developments for set numbers of intended occupiers, if that clarifies and helps. It's intended for the 4 smallest of those. I think is the fairest way to apportion the parking spaces, would be to trickle down from the largest first down to the 12 available, and then for the 4 remaining to just not have a parking space, of which are the smallest units.
Yeah, I think that sort of answers as best you're able to. And did you want to come in now on any policy points, or do you want to hold those? You're going to hold off. Okay, great. Councillor Billing.
I've got a few things, kind of still on the parking situation as well. I know you've just answered that kind of question in the sense of realistically you're wanting people to be potentially one person, but let's say, for instance, every single one of those one person intended flats have a couple, because it happens. That's 28 people. Likelihood is at least half of those might have cars. That's 14 cars. And then that's not even accounting the 2-bed, which then potentially 4 adults or families in those ones, depending on how you look at it. If you're not accounting to then put parking in those places, where are they going to park? Because Orton Head Road itself, or Orton Head, is atrocious. I know, I've seen it, you know, when I've walked that way myself. A lot of people park on the curbs. And I know you've mentioned how, yes, it being closer, but how are you also going to police the parking in this place itself? Purely based on the fact that I know a lot of people drive into town to park closer to town. They might see that as an opportunity to park in this parking space. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, it's private land. So in the normal way with all flatted developments, it's private land. You wouldn't be able to just drive in and park in a public way. Yes, it can't be policed in terms of increasing in occupancy later on, but the sustainable location is what has to just be focused on in this regard, really, with so much, well, everything on your doorstep in terms of it's the most sustainable location in the district, being the most well-served, really the most well-served town for all needs and services, with home working and the choose not to own a car, and the proximity to all forms of public transport, and with an over provision of cycle spaces on site to seek to compensate for the 4 parking spaces missing on site for each unit to have 1 space. So yes, it's but in terms of no one else would be able to park there. It would be I used to own a flat where it was an allocated single space for a 2-bedroom flat, and it worked absolutely perfectly because everyone knows whose space is whose. It's actually in the lease and the title documents as red lined around your flat, plus your red line around your parking space. So it would be in official legal documents with each and every flat for 12 out of the 16 to have an allocated space.
Come back. So can I just clarify, is that what you're planning on doing for these particular parking spaces?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Okay, lovely. Councillor Tyson.
Yes, slowly but surely my question is being answered, and that was really to say, this makes a lot more sense with the idea of allocated parking spaces, but is there anything that we can do to condition that, just to make sure that happens, or is that something that's completely out of our hands, as if it was being suggested as a part of the lease of the apartments, or even a parking permit for each of the residents?
Yeah, I'm not sure the planning system can get involved in the lease of an occupancy of flats. But in buying the flat, that person buying it would know as part of their contract which space is theirs. that'll be set out.
Yeah, but
So
there's
they
nothing
would-
that we can do to ensure
No,
that
no,
happens.
no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Am I right in assuming that there's no provision of any visitors spaces at all on site? Okay, and also the fact that it might be downsizers who might buy the smaller flats, who might be older and might be disabled. Is there any provision of providing guaranteed parking for disability?
I'm going to give James a moment to sort of find that and come up with an answer. So just hold a second.
Thank you. At least one of the spaces could be widened and made as a disabled space, yes. And that can be allocated to, it needs to be allocated to one of the flats in the proposed system though. So that could either be to the larger 1-bed or the 2-bed, I would suggest. So that would be done, yes.
Yes, Councillor Brown.
Thinking about the issue of accessibility, is there a lift in this building or not? And how accessible is it to disabled people? Or is it really the market is intended to be for young, able people who can walk upstairs?
There's not a lift included in the floor plans, no.
Yes, Councillor Billing.
Regarding that, can I just clarify which rooms are like the bigger rooms that would they be upstairs or downstairs?
In terms of so most suitable for a disability unit could be that could be provided on the ground floor as either one of the 1-bed or there is one 2-bedroom one, so that could be provided on the ground floor.
So there is it does follow that kind of same pattern. Bottom floor is exactly the same as like the top floor type thing.
Yes, it's similar. Yes, and then in the on the second floor is just different into the roof space there. But yes, it's very similar for ground and first. Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions, colleagues? No. All right. Thank you very much, James. Right. In that case, I shall invite Ben. Do you want to sum up and respond to any of the issues that have been raised?
Yep.
And if you've still got a policy point that you want to come back on after Ben's done that, we can take that as well.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So I'll try and cover parking first. So the parking spaces, parking policy is based on number of bedrooms rather than occupancy, so number of people living within each flat. And also, so policy T2 and the national planning policy framework does caveat the parking standards in a way that if you are in an accessible location such as this site, with it being close to the centre of Hitchin, having a supermarket nearby, having schools nearby, green space nearby, leisure centre nearby, then we can take that into account when determining an application with an under provision of parking spaces, which is the case here. So for that reason, due to the accessibility of the site with bus links nearby, I think 2 separate bus links nearby, we have considered that the unprovision of parking in this case is acceptable. So again, I think I've mentioned the point of the buyer being aware of within their contract when they buy the property that they will have no parking space or they will have a parking space. Highways Authority have raised no objection to the scheme. They have considered that the traffic movements to and from the site are going to have no unacceptable impact upon local highways networks, and that would be mitigated by some of the sustainable, I don't know the wording, the sustainable mitigation measures that would be form part of the Section 106. Sustainable transport improvements would mitigate the impacts of traffic movement to and from the site. Again, so there would be the alternative 19 spaces provided for cycle parking on site. So that's an alternative to a vehicle in this what we consider to be a sustainable location. I think that more or less covers the point. It's just, so yes, we do have our car parking standards to set out numbers of parking per bedroom, but if there's an under provision, we have things that we can take into account that could potentially reduce that provision and still be deemed acceptable.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Did you have anything that you wanted to add on, Anne, or is that everything? Okay, great. Right then, colleagues. So we have before us a recommendation to grant permission for this application. To take us into the debate, could I have a proposed motion from anyone, please? Yes, I can see Councillor Brown indicating, yeah.
I would like to propose that we grant on the basis that this is policy compliant. I know it's not popular that there aren't enough parking places, but my view is, and I think it's backed up by evidence, that if the main people who are going to buy these are younger people, the car ownership is actually falling amongst young people. It is an incredibly sustainable location. People will know that whether they have a car parking space or not, and they can choose to buy it on that basis. The last thing I want to do is increase congestion in Hitchin, but I think people will be well aware of it when they buy it, and will hopefully buy it on that basis. So I don't see personally why a slight shortfall in the parking provision, you're only talking about 4 units that don't have any parking space, should cause an unacceptable problem. Plus, highways have not objected, so I think it's very difficult to object on those grounds. So I'd like to propose that we grant.
Okay, thank you very much. We've had a proposal. Could I have a seconder, please? Yes, Councillor Mantle.
Yeah, I'm happy to second. I reserve my right to speak later.
Thank you very much. All right, on to the debate. So, colleagues, it's over to you. Yes, Councillor Billing.
I was going to come off from Councillor Brown mentioned that it would be a lack of 4, but based on the policy, it is based on rooms. So it would be 18 rooms, which would be actually a lack of 6 spaces, which I do think is actually quite substantial. I'm a bit concerned that it would be affecting, I don't like the assumptions. I think realistically, the assumption that a younger person may or may not have a car, or if, an elderly person or a disabled person decides to buy a bottom floor flat that is like a really the smallest room, it does concern me. I just don't like the assumptions. So it does worry me, but I do also understand that I don't know if we have grounds to refuse in this matter. But we will, I'll hear the rest of the debate. Thank you.
No worries, thank you. So our relevant policy under the local plan in respect of car parking issues is T2, and Appendix 4 of the local plan is relevant to the car parking standards. Now, in the event that it is possible to reduce the provision where, number 1, alternative publicly available off-street parking is available within 2 minutes walk of the site. Number 2, visitor parking arising from small scale, i.e. infill development, can be accommodated on street without compromising highway safety. the amenity of existing residents, or the ability for businesses to operate. Or 3, relevant evidence is submitted by the applicant which supports a reduction in standard and considers existing and future car ownership and likely visitor demand. So those are the 3 points that we want to be satisfied, and they're not ands, they're ors. So if one of those can be established and there's sufficient weighting there, then we could accept an application which has a reduction in the parking provision. But I think those would be the key questions to consider when we're reflecting on the parking issues this evening. So maybe colleagues bear those in mind, consider what you've heard, consider the reports and the narrative that's provided, as well as the documents you may have seen on the portal. And I'm sure if there's something that we've missed, officers can point us to it in terms of evidence as well to assist us in decision making. Hope that assists. So, Councillor Claydon.
Thank you. I think the parking situation here is not ideal for sure. It's certainly true that there is a severe lack of parking locally on the neighbouring streets, and so overspill is going to be potentially an issue. And even if a disability-friendly space were provided, there's no guarantee that as a person who bought the flat that happened to be associated with that space was the person who had the disability. So you could well end up with the wrong space effectively associated with the wrong flat, and that's something that you can't get out of because you're stuck with it contractually. With that said, I'm not entirely sure that I can see a sustainable reason for turning this down. And it certainly is true that it's very close to the town centre. I think it's also regrettable to lose the care home that's currently there, which is, I recognise there's provision elsewhere in the district, and that's mentioned in the report, but I think that seems like a little bit of a shame. Nevertheless, as I say, I can't see a reason to refuse the application that would be sustainable. So I expect I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson.
Yes, well, I agree that the parking provision is what it is. I don't think that it's for us to speculate and hypothesize about people who buy an apartment in this development and then discover that they can't bring their car there because they hadn't found out in advance that there wasn't anywhere to park. So, I mean, it's really up to the buyer to know, what they're getting into and to be advised appropriately on that. So I think that all things considered, I'd be in favour of approving this on those grounds.
Okay, Councillor Mantle.
2 things. One is, it bothers me we're only talking about people buying the flats. We seem to have forgotten that there'll probably be quite a few of them out on rental. So we are talking not only about purchasers, but also tenants. But the point I really wanted to make, we have a precedent in Letchworth. Some years ago, the housing development on what was the Black Squirrel site was approved on appeal with no parking. I'm not aware that it's caused a serious problem in the centre of Letchworth. We also got the new flats, of course, over Leigh Square with inadequate parking. People in town centres can find somewhere to park.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So I'm not seeing anybody else indicate, and I've had nobody sort of propose any additional conditions or make further points. If we were to consider not granting the application, it would need to obviously not just be something related to the Appendix 4 issues, but thinking about that wider highway safety thing. Is this issue so bad and so severe that we can justifiably say that the development should not go ahead? So those are the questions that we need to weigh up and to balance quite carefully on this, based on the sort of very, very narrow scope of the discomfort that I've heard this evening from members. I still have nobody else indicating that they wish to contribute to the debate. So we've had a motion proposed. I've had a motion seconded. Still nobody else indicating. In that case, could we move to a vote, please, Chanel?
Chair, the motion's carried.
Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. Right. If you would like to take a short 5-minute comfort break, I think that's appropriate given we need to go and fetch Councillor Mason. All right, everybody, thank you very much. We are back. So item number 7 is application 24/00103/FP, which is the country boarding for cats and dogs, Gannock Lane, Slip End, Baldock, Hertfordshire, SG7 6NL. And I have got Alex Howard to present that report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I have no updates for you since the publication of the officer report, so we can go straight to the slides, please. Brilliant, thank you. So the application site is an area of land associated with the country boarding for cats and dogs located to the east of the A505, close to the Sandon Junction. The site currently consists of a number of single-storey buildings, including larger kennels, a reception building, and some diminutive outbuildings and structures. The site benefits from an existing access internal road off Dead Man's Hill and is within close proximity to a sporadic cluster of buildings, including residential properties to the north and west. The site is located outside of any defined settlement boundary and is designated as within the rural area beyond the Greenbelt in the local plan. Next slide, please. So this is a photo from the existing vehicular access into the site from Dead Man's Hill. And this is just another view of that access, and you can kind of make out the sort of internal access road that leads to the existing commercial use with grass areas on either side. This is a photo of the end of that access road where the existing parking area for the commercial use currently is. And that is just another photo of the parking area, and you can kind of make out the kennel buildings in the background of that photo. Next slide, please. And this is just another photo showing that view there. So this is a view from behind the fence we were just looking at, looking back towards the parking area and the access road. And this is a photo from that same spot, just sort of showing the kind of built form that we have on the site associated with the existing commercial use, largely kennels, structures, etc. This is a view from within the site looking south back towards the kennel buildings, and there's an existing brick building which is outside the site, but I believe within the ownership of the applicant. Next slide, please. This is a photo from that same spot, again looking east, and to the left of that photo you can see the existing acoustic fence on the boundary with the neighbour to the north of the site. Next slide, please. This is a view from within the site, again just sort of looking to the area of open space behind the kennel buildings, and in the background there you've got the kind of existing dwellings that are just outside the site adjacent to the A505. This is just another view of that brick building from a few photos ago, and again just more photos of the kind of built form and general structures and fences that you find on the site at the moment. Again, just another one of those photos, really. Again, those photos in the background there with the area of existing open space in the foreground, and again just showing those buildings, really. This is the southern boundary of the site, which is demarked by the dense tree line and a wall to the right. That white render building is a newly constructed dwelling. Next slide, please. And again, just another photo of that southern boundary. And again, just showing another building that's on the site at the moment. So this is the existing reception building. You'll notice it looks more modern than the other ones. This is the building that's proposed to be extended and converted into a dwelling. And again, this is just another view of that building and the kind of the garden area for that building, let's call it, to the right there. This is an aerial view of the site from Google Maps, which shows the site contextualized. This image shows the existing buildings and associated infrastructure for the commercial use, the access, and the internal road leading to Dead Man's Hill, wider field to the east, and sporadic development to the north and west, which are largely dwellings adjacent to the A505. Next slide, please. This is just the site location plan, again showing that site in context. This is the existing site plan. So this shows all of those buildings that you just saw in plan form, sorry. And this, it's quite hard to read, but this is the existing block plan, which shows the buildings to be removed, which are sort of hatched in a red colour. Sorry, that's not zoomed in more. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed site plan, identifying the arrangement of the 6 new proposed bungalows and the converted reception building into an additional dwelling. The access alterations, including a new turning head, parking areas, and associated landscaping and gardens. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a block plan, which kind of shows that similar arrangement from before, but this also shows the insertion of a parking place on that internal access road from Dead Man's Hill. And the next few slides are just showing the existing floor plans and elevations for the buildings that are currently on site. So there's not really much to see, but we can just kind of skip through them. And you see sort of kennel buildings. This one is the proposed elevations and floor plans for the converted reception building. So the one building on site that is to remain and be converted. This is the floor plans and elevations as proposed for plots 2, 4, and 6. Next slide, please. These are the proposed floor plans and elevations for plots 3 and 5. And this, I think that has just changed, sorry. And this is the proposed floor plans and elevations for plot 7. Next slide, please. Actually, sorry, forgive me. That previous one was 3 and 5, and this one I believe is plot 7. Yeah, that would make sense. Next slide, please. And finally, this is an existing and proposed section drawing for the buildings on site, sort of looking west towards the A505, which will be behind. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Has anyone got questions? Yes, Councillor Mason.
I don't know which slide it was, but certainly the Google Earth picture, because I've got it in front of me. The exciting looking double circular concentric circle thing just to the, I'm guessing, southeast of the site. What is that? And is it of any archaeological significance, and should we be worried about it?
My honest answer is I don't know at this stage. I'd have to check. It does have what appears to be a kind of access to the site as existing. I appreciate the applicant is in the room, so perhaps a question that he might be able to answer when he gets a chance to speak, if that's okay. If not, I'll try and find out.
Okay, and Councillor Claydon.
Can I just ask a question of kind of principle? If this development were to go ahead and these dwellings were to be built, would that in itself be a supporting basis or a material consideration for any future development that might then be put forward for the neighbouring area? So would the existence of those houses be a reason for people to then to support future applications in the area?
Well, each application is sort of taken on its merits and the facts and degrees of what's put in front of us as officers. Obviously, I've set that out in the report. I don't think that just because if you are minded to agree with the recommendation and approve it, I don't think that somebody could just come along and say, oh, you approve that one, you have to approve this one. It all depends on the facts of the case.
So it wouldn't be a material consideration in itself?
It would be essentially a material consideration, but not one that just says you approved that one at committee. That means you have to approve this one.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I know where you're coming from, but yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Allen.
So I was just looking on Google Maps as well. We're trying to work out what that circular thing is too. We've got some interesting answers. I'm not going to say them. This is probably going to actually, when I look at it again, it's probably going to be a very obvious answer in the report. But is the 6 bungalows, are they going to be owned by the people who the applicant and used by the applicant, or are these going to be individual dwellings sold separately?
Is this I that wouldn't be something that we would consider, to be honest with you. What if permission is granted and the
Yeah.
dwellings are indeed built? What happens to those buildings is the concern of whoever owns the land at that point. It's not.
No, I mean, that's not the problem. I was just
Oh,
thinking
sorry.
about the, it was a mixture of the layout and with the, hang on a minute, my words have gone. It was leading into the next bit of the question, which is on the proposed plan, which shows what it's going to look like, the bird's eye view of what it's going to look like when it's done.
Yeah.
I just wanted to work out if they were going to be individually owned dwellings, because I was trying to work out on the new proposed layout if you could get a bin lorry down there and turn it round. Because it did look really narrow on the layout, and that's a very narrow lane to get down. It'd be very tricky to reverse down. I have seen that there has been no response on the waste and recycling team. I
Yes.
think it's going to be a little bit of a concern. So that's why I was just asking about it being an individual setup and the boundary lines being at each individual property.
So your question is, would a bin lorry be able? So so obviously there's a turning head proposed, and that turning head is obviously where the bin lorry would essentially turn in, and then right next to that turning head, you can kind of see a little square. That's the bin storage area.
Yeah. So
That-
it would be out there as opposed to.
Yeah,
We had this
it-
discussion on a previous development
Yes,
as well.
Yeah, we did a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, no, I remember. No, I mean the bin lorry would, to my mind, not be expected to come into the site and go down all the way to plot 2.
Okay.
It would stop at the turning head,
Mm.
pick up the rubbish from that place, and then be able to leave
So in
it
this
forward
situation,
here.
it would have to be because of the narrowness of that lane.
Yes.
There would have to be something done like that, and we
Yes.
can't widen the lane or anything.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a sort of very brief waste and recycling note at paragraph 4.3.38, which indicates that residents would be expected to present the bins on the morning of collection day, and the collection point's about a 45-meter and a 40-meter walk from the furthest dwelling, and within 30 meters and 5 minutes of the other dwelling. 5 minutes, 30 meters and 5 meters of the other dwelling. So 45 meters and 40 is the longest, and 30 meters and 30 meters is the other 5. The waste and recycling team were consulted but didn't respond. And in the absence of response, officers have considered that the proposed arrangement is considered to be acceptable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. So am I right in thinking that the only access out of this site is via Deadman's Hill onto the A505? Is that correct? And you can turn left and right onto the A505 from there? Correct.
I believe you can cut over and then go into the left lane and go towards Royston, correct?
Okay. And there are no services at all on this site.
Not at all.
So you cannot access any services on a bicycle or on foot or by public transport at all.
Correct. Yeah. That
So
would be my opinion.
7 bungalows, residents thereof are going to be totally reliant on a private vehicle. Can you comment about, and maybe you don't know, but can you comment about why they've chosen bungalows on this site?
Well, my view on why they went for bungalows is because this is rural area on the Greenbelt, and when you're replacing buildings in that, it's all about how it being materially larger. So obviously, as you saw, the pictures of the buildings are quite low level. So bungalows is the easy option to meet that policy because they're innately lower than 2-story, 3-story, big buildings. Just touching on your point about there being no accessibility and being reliant on private vehicles, this is covered extensively in my report, and there is a highways objection, you're probably aware.
Yep.
And obviously this is a brownfield site and it's 7 dwellings. So on balance, we felt that, especially with the latest government guidance wanting to build homes, that the level of dwellings sort of outweighed that sort of non-compliance with the policy SP2, which obviously we would love to put all houses in sustainable locations, but sometimes these sites come along.
But this is completely unsustainable in terms of location. It couldn't be much more unsustainable. Also, I would like to just comment on that section of the A505 is one where we've actually run a petition to reduce the speed limit because that's such a dangerous section. And it's currently 70 miles an hour. We took a petition to the highways panel in county on this one, and it is just under the criteria for the enough people killed and seriously injured to meet the criteria for reduction of speed limit.
Okay.
But there are a ridiculous numbers of turnings in a very short space, and it's a very, very dangerous part of the A505. And I don't want to make, we talked about assumptions about who lives where in the previous item, and I don't want to make assumptions, but often the people that buy bungalows are elderly. And it worries me that this is totally reliant on private cars. So yeah, anyway, I don't think I've got anything else really to ask. I know it's extensively covered in the report, but I just did want to bring it out because I think it's a pretty important point.
That was a mini speech. You're very cheeky. This is the question section. Warning to everybody else. I've indulged Councillor Brown. I am watching the clock and I might not be as indulgent to others. You have been warned. Councillor Claydon.
There's mention in the report of a condition with regard to solar panels on the roof. Could you just clarify what the status of that is? Is that a firm condition, or is it simply one possibility?
So we get this question a lot at committee about putting solar panels on, and whilst our policies can't basically say you have to put solar panels on dwellings, what we can do is incorporate a condition that considers sustainability measures, with one of those being solar panels. So that is an agreed condition, agreed by the agent and the applicant. That will be, I believe it's pre-commencement actually, so it would be agreed details before they can actually break ground on site.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And Councillor Tyson.
I've been beaten to it again. I was going to ask about the solar panels condition, and but I would say, or I'll try and formulate this as a question. But I've used that road for the last many decades, and I know how difficult it is to get across the A505 from the Baldock side, and those cut-throughs are perilous. I've only been hit there once in the past, but consider myself lucky. And going up Dead Man's Hill, which is a stretch of road that I'm very familiar with, it is, to all intents and purposes, a single track road for most of its length, but it is very straight and people do tend to go very quickly along it. Have we got any statistics for traffic, sort of numbers of movements and speeds on that road? And is there any chance of getting a speed limit introduced if this were to go ahead?
Short answer is there is a transport technical statement on the file, which highways have considered, and they agree largely that the proposed use for residential would generate less trips than the current commercial use, which kind of touches on the sustainability argument here, that this is a better land use than the other one. I don't know if within that note they would need to, or even have the scope to do that road going that way. I'm not really sure if it touches on that. I'm not a transport expert, so I wouldn't want to misadvise you, to be honest with you. And have a look. Yes. So yeah, it seems to assess the A505 and talk about incidents and accidents at 2:30. I've just controlled F Dead Man's to try and find that mention of that road, and nothing's come up.
No.
So I'm going to assume that it isn't covered in the in statement.
Thank you. I think
The other obvious, sorry, just to
Sorry.
follow on
No,
from that, the other obvious sort of logical request would be some sort of passing places, and just even thinking about the refuse collection vehicle going up there, which presumably it has to do to get to Sandon from one side or the other. But that's,
Sorry to clarify, are you
oh, this I'm talking about Dead Man's.
you're asking about
Yeah.
the road outside the access?
Yes, the
I
lane
think that
outside.
would probably be outside the scope of this application,
Okay.
to be honest with you. It's not a major application where we would seek obligations such as highway obligations and improvements alike. So yeah, whilst it would be nice, don't think we can insist on it,
Thank you.
fortunately.
I think this sort of kind of proves the benefit of having a highways officer present when we've got a major highways point and when highways have objected to something, and it's slightly disappointing that they're not here to assist and help answer those questions, because as brilliant as Alex is, it's really not his technical job to be filling that space. So
Certainly
well done for trying.
Thank-
Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, well, following on really from the kind of lack of sustainability of the location, if I would, is the provision in the planning for EV charging at the properties? Yes.
Yep. So part of the benefits of this scheme is that all of them will have EV charging points. That's, I believe, now a requirement under building control anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's in there as a condition to be locked in, as it were. If you
That
agree.
mitigates a bit of the necessity to use a car all
That's
the time,
the idea.
I
Yeah,
suppose.
absolutely,
But
yes.
and also, if it were families who lived there who had children of school age, I don't know. I mean, presumably there are other rural bus routes, school buses that run in the area. Would this be able to be included as a pickup point in the future?
So I think because of where it is, I don't know if there's a pickup point for the bus. But what I will say is the agents and indeed the applicant did mention that they could deliver like the Lynx bus service.
Right. Okay.
But we cannot secure that through the planning system because of the number of dwellings is under the amount for
Right.
obligations.
Okay.
So it would be unreasonable of us to go through a legal undertaking,
Yeah.
and it would set an undesirable precedent. So in my report, I've kind of said that they can do that if they want to, and it's encouraged. But in terms of what we can actually do reasonably to make sure they do it, we're very limited.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, sorry to come back to the point about the solar panels. Is that I can't see it in the report at the minute, but is this something that we could condition actually?
So it's condition 15. So it's right at the bottom of page 66. So I'll read it. Prior to commencement, a site-wide sustainability strategy shall be submitted to the local planning authority for approval, addressing renewable energy, reducing carbon emissions and water conservation. And that's what we've been, I think, doing consistently, because as I've said, our policies don't allow us to just say that you have to have solar panels on dwellings. So this is kind of how we secure that these kinds of measures on schemes.
I thought that we had imposed a condition for solar panels in a previous application not very long ago. No?
I think Sean, a couple of weeks ago when I was here, that question came up, and I think he said that we can't do it because a policy doesn't. We have an SPD coming, which will help that, but at the moment we don't have it. So this is essentially the next best thing.
That's pretty much it. And until the sustainability SPD comes through, we're going to be reliant on the ambiguity within this.
That's been hanging around for far too long, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think the policy concern will be noted and dealt with in other places. Right. I'm not seeing anybody else indicate that they have further questions for Alex, so I shall move on to the applicant. Jeremy, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. So I'd like to introduce myself. My wife and I have lived in Hitchin for 42 years. We've operated a successful child daycare nursery, which was repurposed Grove Mill in Hitchin, and sort of saved it from demolition. We sold that, and now we've been operating from the application site that's being considered this evening for the past 13 years. We're both past, I suppose, retirement age, and we've been trying to sell this business for 4 years without success. So the trend, but I'd just like to let you know that the trend for large kennels, I mean, we were licensed by the authority for 75 dogs. The trend is only downwards. Many kennels have closed over the past 5 years. Certainly in the local area, we sort of keep our ears to the ground, and I'm not aware of any that have opened up in North Hearts in the past 13 years, and maybe the officer would be able to confirm that or not, but I don't think kennels are easy to get planning for. So overnight daycare now takes place in people's private homes, hopefully licensed by the council, sometimes not though. Now this site, as far as we're concerned, has had quite a troubled past with neighbours due to noise nuisance incidents, and has actually had 2 enforcement notices against it. And I'd like to say that we worked closely with the planners to come to a very amicable agreement and to a solution which they were happy with. The residents to the west and the east probably weren't too happy with it, but so be it. It's very interesting. I think that this application hasn't, as far as I know, hasn't had any objectors at all, which is quite unusual if you've got a fairly large proposal right up against other people's properties. They generally have something to say. But Kelshall meeting haven't had a problem, and I will imagine that the neighbours are going to be only too pleased to the prospect of being rid of this quite a large business next to their properties. Yes, there was some questions from members about access. I mean, there is a footpath, public footpath along the A505, and a number of our employees in the past have actually crossed the A505 and walked from. They obviously should take their correct time, obviously, but they have walked to the train station in Station Road, Ashwell, to get access to that sort of system. But I'm not saying that's necessarily ideal. With regarding to large vehicles, we regularly have large lorries come for deliveries, and I don't think access is actually an issue at all to that along that road. And the other thing is, of course, this application has far fewer vehicles and vehicle movements. We will get sort of 60, 70 movements a day. We're talking only much fewer from a small development. So 10 years ago, I have to say, I would have been against any local development. But we found that our 3 daughters have had to move away from North Harts because they can't afford to buy a house in this area due to the housing shortage. So we've proposed. The question came up: why bungalows? Well, we've purposely proposed modest 3-bedroom bungalows rather than large executive homes. This side's actually got quite a nice aspect out onto open countryside, ideal for large, expensive homes. But we've suggested smaller homes that hopefully will be suitable for young families.
Got 30 seconds.
Yeah, in one sense, it's a pity that the kennels can't carry on, but quite honestly, given our circumstances, we feel this is the most appropriate use for this site. So I'd like to just finally thank the planning team for the approachable professional attitude they've taken in determining their recommendations. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for picking up on some of the questions that came up earlier as well. Right. So, colleagues, do you want to draw anything further out from what Jeremy's presented? Do you have any further questions for him? Yes, Councillor Mason.
Yeah, what's my mystery circle?
That we actually, would you believe that actually has planning permission? And back in 2015, we wanted to put a small lake or a pond, I suppose, for dogs to play in. And in fact, just this week, we did actually repurpose the sand that was in Hitchin Square as the play sand, and that was going to go to landfill. And we asked the relevant people, could we have it instead? So that sand is now up in that area, in that circle, with a sand pit for dogs, with a small pond.
There we go. Mystery solved. Okay, excellent. Any further questions that are relevant and specific to the planning application, not to dogs? Great. Councillor Fernandez.
I'm not sure whether this is in the report or if the number of properties is below the amount that require some to be affordable, or are any of, yes.
There we go. Yeah. So no, you don't need to answer that one. Just for clarity on microphone. Yeah, the size of the application, the number of properties is below the affordable housing threshold. So there's no requirement for affordable housing on this site. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Tyson.
I'd like to ask Jeremy if he would be prepared to commit here this evening to building these bungalows with solar panels and battery storage facilities.
Do you want me to answer?
Literally, no, I think it's very important to mitigate the otherwise unsustainable nature of the site.
Yep. I think Councillor Tyson's asked a valid question. It's up to you as the applicant whether or not you're prepared to make that commitment at this stage, or if you're satisfied with the condition as it currently stands.
Well, I personally would be willing to admit to it, because we have extensive solar panels on our buildings already, plus 3 electric vehicles, but we don't propose to be developing this site. It'll be up to somebody who else to take that on.
So I think that's I'd like to keep the condition as it currently stands, please, despite the fact that personally I might feel that this would be a good idea, just because there's wider considerations given what's likely to happen with the site in future and who's going to be building it out. I can see I share your disappointment, and I do hope that the sustainability SPD comes through soon. Right. Any further questions? No, I'm seeing no one indicate. Right. Thank you very much for your time, Jeremy. It was very helpful. You solved a mystery for us tonight, which is always good. I shall pass back to Alex. Do you have yes.
Thank you. I'd like to come in a point of clarification on condition 15, because actually the condition 15 as it's worded is not binding. So all it states is prior to commencement of the site, a site-wide sustainability strategy shall be submitted. These measures should be agreed, but it's not binding to make it happen on site. So I propose change the wording of condition 15, which after where it says water conservation, it needs to go on to say, and the measures shall be implemented on site prior to the first occupation of each dwelling. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point. I'm not going to ask the applicant whether or not they accept that, because obviously without that additional wording, the condition in and of itself is a nonsense, because you could present a report and then not implement anything. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. I think that was a very useful amendment. Alex, do you want to sum up?
Yeah, first of all, that's my bad. Apologies for not having that last sentence. Just touching on solar panels again, obviously if permission is granted tonight and the applicant sells the site, obviously sells the permission to build these, so the developer will be bound by that condition pre-commencement. So if they don't want to do it, they'll have to come in and apply to either remove it or vary it. So at that point we can consider it, but if permission is granted tonight with that condition subject to the wording that Anne's just added, it's binding on this consent, which I think is a benefit. I think overall a lot has been said that the site isn't sustainable. I think in principle that's agreed with myself and the agents acting on behalf of the applicant, but I think in the rounds as covered in my report at 4343 to 4348, in the round, the number of dwellings, the fact that this is a more sustainable use of the land compared to the existing commercial use, the fact that national and local policy does accept that in isolated locations sometimes it's not going to be that sustainable, and you accept a kind of lower level of accessibility on occasion. I think if there was no development on this site at all, it'd be a very different conversation. But the fact is that there is a commercial business on this site, which is why I think the principle of development and overall in the planning balance, this is a favourable one. So I think I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. So we've got a report that recommends granting this planning permission. Could I have somebody to propose a motion, please? Councillor Allen.
Right. I'd like to propose that we grant planning permission on the basis of, much like the previous application and discussions that we've had, people know what they're purchasing and where they're purchasing it and what they're going to be purchasing. I think this, after much discussion, I think this is going to be suitable for the site.
Okay, great. Thank you. And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mason.
Second to reserve my right to speak.
There we go. Lovely. Right, brings us neatly into debate. Do colleagues have any points of debate that they want to raise? Just to clarify, Councillor Allen, your proposal to grant, is that subject to the additional wording that Anne proposed?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Sorry,
Thank you. Yeah. No. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to vote in favour of this. Well, not entirely happy, obviously, but I'm satisfied that if that condition can be met and is met, then we'll be doing something to offset the harm caused by the traffic movements and that are necessary here. And I would also like to say about this, the idea that it's more sustainable because the customers from the kennel will have gone away. It's only partially true, because presumably they're going to take their cats and dogs to another kennel instead. So, I mean, it may be that this application site as such will see less vehicle movements, but they're going to go somewhere, and they may have to go further to get to the facility that they need. So, I mean, on that respect, I think it's a somewhat spurious argument. Equally, I think that the transport note, the consultants need to have a good look at themselves for recommending that you can walk to Ashwell or Odsey across the A505 and along a bramble infested footway. I don't know what your employees were thinking of doing that, but that the public transport on those two bus routes names there would be something that's worth walking to is another question altogether. And also, I think that the Trix projections were very curious in that they didn't seem to be based on anything at all similar to this particular site. Probably they haven't got statistics collected on a similar site, but to have projections made from a suburb of Norwich, for example, I think is just, beggars belief, to be honest. But apart from all of that, yeah, okay.
Yep, brilliant.
I'm not impressed by some elements of this application, but overall, I think in the balance of things, yeah, it's acceptable.
Great. Thank you. I think we got that. And as a reminder, colleagues, as wonderful as cats and dogs and brambles are, they're not material planning conditions. We can't take into account whether or not the movement of cats and dogs is indeed going to make something more or less sustainable. But yes, no, points taken. And I think actually, as I said earlier, it would have been very, very helpful and very useful to assist the committee if we had highways here. And I think that there's potentially some follow-on work that it would be beneficial for colleagues at County Council to do at some point to assist and support this site, given some of the concerns that they've raised. But that, again, isn't a matter for us to make a determination on, unfortunately. Right. I see nobody else indicating. In which case, could we please move to a vote on the proposal, which is to grant permission subject to the amended wording of condition 15?
Chair, that motion's carried.
Great. Thank you very much. Right. Next on the agenda is item 11, because we are skipping over the items in respect of the ball now that has been withdrawn. Thank you, Jeremy. You may leave the room and go about your evening. Thank you for coming. So agenda item number 11 is 23/02706/FP, which is the land west of Avenue 1, Letchworth Garden City, Hertfordshire, SG62WW. Alex is presenting this report as well.
Thank you, Chair. And good evening again, everyone. I have no updates for you again since the publication of the report. So yeah, we can go straight to the slides again if that's okay. Thank you very much. So the site is an area on the western side of Avenue 1 Letchworth and currently consists of a vacant plot. The site is bounded to the rear and sides by commercial units. The site is within an industrial employment area, with surrounding sites being consistent with that character. And in the adopted local plan, the site is within employment area LE1. Next slide, please. This is a photo showing the access point on Avenue 1 looking north towards the site. It's sort of behind that hedge on the left of the photo. Next slide, please. This is a photo showing the existing front verge area. That's fronting Avenue 1. This is a photo showing the inner access. So you turn off Avenue 1 and then you would veer left into this internal access, which is proposed to be a gated entrance. Next slide, please. This is a photo looking north from sort of within the site, from that inner access point with the neighbouring units in view at the back there. And this is a photo taken from within the site looking south towards the neighbouring units, which that's the unit that shares the same access off Avenue 1. This photo is looking towards the front of the site from within. So this is approximately where the proposed office block would be sited. And this is the site plan, which shows the proposal for a headquarters building for the Wheatley Group Developments Limited with a workshop and storage facilities and associated car parking and landscaping. The headquarters office building would be sited back from Avenue 1 with a landscaping strip to the frontage. The access to the car parking area and rear workshop storage building would be gained from the southern boundary along the side of the building there. The workshop storage building would be set behind the front office building. So this is the proposed elevations for the front office block. And this is the proposed elevations for the warehouse storage building, which is to the rear. So this application is actually my colleague Melissa's, who's drafted a conclusion that she'd like me to read. So in the absence of any material or sustainable grounds for objection, the recommendation to the planning committee is a resolution to grant permission subject to LLFA matters being resolved. The proposal would have an acceptable visual impact, and it is considered that it would not have an adverse impact on highway safety or parking. The proposal would not have an adverse impact in terms of archaeology or contamination subject to the recommended conditions. Officers are satisfied that the details provided and the additional conditions and informatives to be imposed are satisfactory to ensure an acceptable standard of development that would not occasion harm to this locality. And that is the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. And just to preempt any obvious questions, LLFA stands for Lead Local Flood Authority. Yes, I don't like jargon or various acronyms, as you know. Lovely. Councillor Billing.
Hiya. In picture 1 and 2, the cars that were on the road, I assume they're probably all parked. I know that there are going to be parking spaces in this. Is there any kind of, I can't think of the word, anything that we can put forward to suggest that there's double yellow lines along that road to make it safer? Because I know that building next to there have a lot of fear and worry about coming out of that junction because of how the cars are parked.
So my view is, and this is indeed Melissa's view, is that no, there's nothing we can really do about it. It's outside the red line. So it's not of consideration of this application, or an issue indeed that the applicant would need to consider as part of the submission. And furthermore, the Highway Authority have raised no objection to this and not mentioned the matter that you're raising as well. So that would be my response in that respect.
Yeah. I'm mindful as well that we've got paragraph 4.3.11, which says the development would provide disabled parking bays, cycle parking, and adequate off-street parking to meet the needs of the development. The total parking provision is considered reasonably close to the maximum, with any additional parking not considered likely to adversely affect the public highway. So I think from sort of my reading and understanding of that, the intention is that they will hopefully have sufficient car parking spaces for that site, not to add to the existing issues. But in the absence of advisories from the Highways Authority or sort of those strong objections, again, we're going to be in that territory of having to weigh up the harm versus the benefits and the other planning policies. Lovely. Any further questions, colleagues? No. Okay, right. So we have no public participation on this one. So I am looking again for a proposal. The recommendation from officers is to grant. Do I have anybody seeking to make any proposals? Yes, Councillor Brown.
I propose that we grant.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Claydon.
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. I note that you didn't say that you were reserving rights. So I'll just assume that you are. Anybody wishing to speak on the debate? No, cool. I'm not seeing anybody indicating they want to speak on the debate. So we've had a proposal to grant and that has been seconded. Please, could we have a vote?
Chair, that matters. Yeah. The application is granted.
Thank you. Do you know what? Compared to our normal running times for these committees, it's far too early to be getting tired. We have got one substantive matter left and then the appeals tracker. Does anybody desperately feel that they need a break at this time, or are you happy to crack on? Do you want a break? Yep. Excellent. I'm going to allow a sort of quick 2-minute, 3-minute break, however long we need. Thank you, colleagues. All right. Thank you very much. Wrap up conversations now. Back to work. Yes, good. Well done. Right. Agenda item number 12 is application 24/01285/S73. This is the land north of 68 London Road, Baldock, Hertfordshire, SG7 6JL. And Anne is presenting this one.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I have no updates for this item, so if we could move to the slides, please. Thank you. I'm sure members, well, some members may remember dealing with the original application for this in 2020. It's originally a part owned, NHDC owned the top part of the site, the former allotments, and number 68 is the bottom part of the site. So planning permission was granted for 24 dwellings. And this is a very minor amendment to add 2 garages to 2 of the plots, but due to the site area tonight, it's got to come in front of you. So next slide, please. So this is the site as existing, as it was quite overgrown. The original house has now since been demolished. Next slide, please. And this is looking across to the former allotments to the back of Clare Crescent. Next slide, please. So this is the layout plan that's been approved, and the 2 properties that are to have the garages on the northwest corner, the detached house, and then the sort of house just above it. So next slide, please. This shows the design style of the 3 houses. So the house, the brick house on the right-hand end is plot 21, which is going to have the single garage next to it. Next slide, please. This shows the detached house from plot 22. So again, this is to show you the design of the property that's already been approved. Next slide, please. And this is the layout plan. So you can just make out the 2 garage roofs on the plots. So it's a double garage for the house in plot 22 and a single garage for the house in plot 21. There's absolutely no objection to these garages at all. There's not going to have any harm on the neighbouring amenity of those properties in Clare Crescent. So you can see it's quite well spaced. There's existing trees, which will cause some provide some visual screening. Next slide, please. And this is the design. So it's obviously in keeping with the sort of arts and crafts styles of the dwellings. So the application is recommended for a conditional permission along with a deed to vary the original section 106 to tie it into this permission, because obviously a section 73 in effect re-grants the planning permission all over again. It doesn't amend or supersede the first permission. So we're still waiting for the deed of variation to be finalised. So this is for you tonight as a resolution to grant. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do you colleagues have any questions? No? Yes, Councillor Claydon.
I do have a question, but it's basically just ignorance. Does this variation affect the time available for the time before which the development has to start?
The first permission.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. There's no such thing as a stupid question in this space, especially when it's about technical points like that. So feel free to ask them. All right. As long as it's not about all right. We are not going back to cats, dogs, brambles, walking routes, etc., unless it happens to be relevant to the application. Everyone's getting very giddy and excited because this is an unusually short meeting. Right. Councillor Brown.
And at the risk of having another silly question, I think I chaired that meeting, but I can't remember much about it. But anyway, do the other buildings have garages, and why the change?
No, none of the other plots have garages, and I think it's just sort of variety and to provide for market choice ultimately.
Okay.
All right. I see no further questions. Again, I have no members of the public, no applicants or objectors here. So I shall pass back to Anne. Is there anything you need to sum up on this?
No, thank you.
No, everything's been covered. Great. So we've got a recommendation from officers to grant. Would anybody like to come up with an appropriate motion? I see Councillor Tyson.
I would like to recommend that we accept the recommendation to grant.
And I see Councillor Brown.
I would like to second.
Thank you, colleagues. Any debate? I have nobody indicating. It's very good. And could we please move to a vote?
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I will apologise to colleagues if you've seen me looking down at my phone and using that quite a lot this evening. It's because my laptop was doing a system update and it has now finally finished updating and let me back in just at the moment when I no longer need to be using or accessing resources on the laptop. Item number, use the right piece of paper. Item number 13 on the agenda is our planning appeals tracker. And you want to sort of take us through and draw out anything that you think is particularly notable?
Well, I was just going to say though, I don't really have any obvious comments. They start on page 131 in the papers. There's obviously been some new appeals submitted, but if they scroll on, we've had 2 decisions in which both been dismissed, which is obviously what we like to see. But I don't have anything specific to raise unless anybody's got any direct questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And obviously we've also got the transcripts of the appeal decisions as well appended to the report. Do you colleagues have any questions? Councillor Brown.
I just wondered, to date, do we know how many appeals have been dismissed versus allowed? Because my impression is that most of the appeals are being dismissed, which is a great position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a high 90s that are being dismissed at the moment, as I understand.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a point of qualification. Was that 90%?
Yes.
Yes. Just not high 90s of cases, 90% of the referrals that go through. Cool. Any further questions from colleagues? Yes, Councillor Claydon.
Just to follow up on that, do we know how that compares to other authorities nearby?
I'm afraid I don't know that.
Okay,
I'm afraid.
no problem.
Okay. I get the point that you're making in that, and what I will do is sort of make a note of it and ask Sean if he can just sort of confirm and let the committee know. I don't think it's really necessarily something that we're able to use as a benchmark, because obviously there are avoidable and unavoidable reasons why a case might end up being appealed, etc., etc. But it might be useful just for us to have, it's nice sometimes to have that comparison, isn't it? Yeah, so I think we can take that away as an action for Sean, just to circulate to the committee and clarify that question. Right, I see nobody else indicating that they have any questions. The report is merely for noting, so there is no need to vote. Councillor Mason is packing up his bag because he has correctly anticipated that that was our final item of business this evening. Thank you very much. I will close the meeting and let you get back to your evenings. Thank you, colleagues. Good night.